You're watching HCAM TV.
All right, we should be live on Facebook for the first time. Welcome everybody to the Hopkinton Hangout Hour, and thank you for joining us. We are live on Tuesday, July the 21st, and I am very happy that this half hour is going to be the first of 5 scheduled sessions of Ask the Superintendent. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, we'll be talking about all things Hopkinton Public Schools. So, Dr. Cavanagh, welcome to the Hangout Hour again.
Thank you, Jim. It's really nice to be back in Hangout Hour, and it's just really nice to be back on HCAM. I mean, we used to do a whole lot of shows together, and it feels like old times.
Yes, I know. I've been thinking about highlights from the Hill, and what we could do about that. And I'm hoping that that we can continue things, and get things going under these conditions safely and informatively, if that's a word. But let's start off with, it's been a few weeks since you've been on the Hangout Hour and kind of talking about that. And I must imagine that there has been a huge amount of information coming and going and changing and being revised. What has it been like these past few weeks when you look for guidance from the state or the federal level or anything like that?
Sure. So, I'm glad that we're actually doing this today, because to have done it much earlier than this, a lot of the guidance that we have been looking for from the Commissioner of Education has sort of been slow in coming. And, I think that he's being really methodical about this and watching the trajectory of the virus and trying to figure out whether or not it is feasible for districts to have all of their students back under one roof, or if students need to come back in different capacities, or if students are not able to come back at all. And I think that we've all discovered that varies district to district. So I think districts need to make decisions about whether you want to do 6 feet or 3 feet of social distancing, how your transportation works, how your food service works. So there are so many variables that's really what we've been doing in Hopkinton, is thinking about those things as an administrative team and as a reentry advisory group. So you may also know that we have a 36-member reentry advisory group that has literally been working around the clock.
Yes. Now, when you're making these decisions and you're talking about our district, we have a one-town district, Hopkinton. I'm wondering, do you have to factor in other districts in regards to a busing company obviously services more than one town, and the food service companies may plan for food for a larger area? Do you have to look at other districts as well, or are you just focused like a laser beam?
We really are just focused on Hopkinton. But that said, most of the principals and the assistant superintendent and the tech director and we all belong to job-alike groups. So superintendents and assistant superintendents and building principals are getting together all the time across Tri-County, across the tech districts, across the accept districts, so that we really have a very good sense of what's going on in other districts. And in this way, we share a lot of, I think, very good ideas, but across the tech districts, so there are 9 of us, there are 2 districts right now that are thinking about opening fully, taking every single student in. And there are some that are going to be probably in a hybrid model that attends less than 50%. So you can see that people are all over the place. When you talk about things like the bus company, our bus company does service many districts. And so we've had conversations about, even if we wanted to bring in an additional 20 or 30 buses, it's not feasible to do that, because Conley Bus isn't going to buy 20 buses for Hopkinton that we only have a use for hopefully a year or 18 months. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah.
And food service for us is a sort of a business that we keep in house. We at one time had Whitson's food service, but now we do that independently through our own personnel.
I did not know that.
Yes.
That's really cool.
It is very cool. Yeah.
And by doing that, you're halfway to having a culinary curriculum right there in the school.
That is sort of true. We could probably do that. Yes.
All right, so now I'm reading between the lines a little bit. So when you're talking about maybe if you had a need for another 20 or 30 buses, what would that mean? Would that mean that you're doing half days with all of the students and that like half come in and half go home, or am I reading too much in this?
No, I'll be perfectly honest and talk about some of the models that we considered. The reentry advisory group was divided sort of into 9 different subcommittees. And 3 of those subcommittees dealt with scheduling. One at the secondary level, one at the middle school, one at the high school, one at the middle school, one at the elementary level. So what we talked about was bringing every single student in and doing that for full days. We talked about bringing every student in and doing that for half days. The advantage to doing the half days is that when it came time for lunch, and lunch is the one place where the Commissioner of Education says you must socially distance by 6 feet because kids are going to be taking their masks off.
Yep.
And then that raises the issue of, are you talking just about 6 feet, or are you talking about 2 feet of personal space plus 6 feet?
Mm.
Every time you add that in, it gets harder and harder to accommodate kids. The nice thing about the half days is you would be able to accommodate additional bus runs. So you could have 4 different bus runs and have kids in school for only 3.5 hours, and that would not cause any busing problems whatsoever. We also considered looking at hybrid models where half the kids come one week, then the next week they have remote instruction while their peers are in having remote instruction, then they come in person. We also talked about what would it look like if you had kids come on Monday, Tuesday, one cohort, everybody is out on Wednesday, another cohort comes on Thursday, Friday. And one of the things we didn't like about that so well was that if you were a kiddo who came on Thursday, Friday, you'd go Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday before you came back 5 days. You may as well have just lost all the things that were taught to you last Thursday and Friday.
Yeah.
So that was discredited. And then we also looked at the every other day models. You come Monday, Wednesday, Friday this week and get remote instruction Tuesday, Thursday. And the other one is then the flip week, you come Tuesday, Thursday and get remote instruction Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So 50% of the children are in our buildings all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That one academically we like very well because it most closely emulates regular school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about this? And I don't know if you thought about this or it was kind of, what if every class was cut in half? Okay. As we're talking, half of the class is at home on their computers watching the teacher in the classroom as they teach that half, and that switches every week. That way they're continuing on and not having like a week off and losing what they've just learned.
Sure. So we will be providing remote instruction to the kids who are the 50% at home. But I think that whole issue of having a teacher delivering that live stream kind of instruction while she's also delivering in-person instruction gets to be a little bit tricky because you know that there have been disasters in other places, even in Massachusetts, where parents have recorded teachers and then held it up for scrutiny and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't fault the Teachers Association when they are a little bit skittish of that kind of a model. That said, you are saying something that makes great sense because if on Tuesday I need to push out new information to students, I would record myself getting ready to put that information out and then I'd send it out, but then I do the same thing in the classroom. So it's almost like I'm delivering the same instruction twice in 2 different modalities.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is I can really control what kind of goes out to families. You know what I mean?
Yes, I see. So you thought about that.
We have thought about that.
All right. One of these days, I'm gonna come up with an idea that you haven't thought of yet, but it hasn't happened yet.
No, I think a lot of people have emailed and made some really good suggestions, but we have heard a lot of things from a lot of people. So
Okay. And okay.
That doesn't mean we're not interested in hearing from more people. We are.
Okay. When does school start?
Well, that's also an interesting question. So normally what would happen is on the Monday before Labor Day, All the teachers would report back to school, and we would have 2 teacher days on Monday and Tuesday. And then the kids would come Wednesday, Thursday, and then on Friday, everyone would enjoy a nice long Labor Day weekend. This year, the commissioner has said that he's thinking about adding 3 professional days to the start of the school year. So that would mean that kids who usually have to go 180 days would only go 177. And then that would mean that there would be 5 professional learning days prior to the start of school, the 2 that we usually do, and the 3 that the commissioner has given to us. So that would probably mean that school would not begin until the Wednesday after Labor Day, like it used to back in the 70s.
Okay.
Mhm. But that's not carved in stone. So I
I
don't
know.
want the audience to say, oh, she said.
So quick question.
Mhm.
Is anything carved in stone yet?
Hardly anything is carved in stone.
Yeah.
I think we will be on the 31st of July. There needs to be a preliminary report submitted by Hopkinton to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Mhm.
On the 30th of July, the night before, there will be a school committee meeting where we talk about what we're submitting and we have a public forum. And then once we have all of the information that we feel is pretty concrete, which should happen in the next 5 to 10 days, we can push that information out to families and ask people to make a decision about whether they want in-person instruction or remote instruction for their children. But I want them to be able to make a very informed decision.
Right. Yeah, that's why I'm really excited about the show, because there's just so much, there's so much information. And right now, I think Bob popped in because he's got a question to share with us.
Question from one of our YouTube viewers, Laura Estevez. She says also, remote instructions differ from in-person. Teachers need to use different strategies to improve engagement. I think that's a comment as opposed to a question, but
Yeah.
That's fine. I'm happy to address that. In the reentry advisory group, we did have 3 groups that were used really to give us feedback and direction on, what we did well in the hybrid model in the spring and what we could work on. And we did that at the high school, middle school, and elementary levels. So there is an awful lot of professional development that will happen for our teachers, just so that we can be sure that we're maximizing the instructional time that we have with our students face to face, that we are maximizing what we put out, and that we are increasing student engagement. And not that we want our kids to respond to instruction only when grades are involved, because we hope that they value learning for the sake of learning. But we also think that there'll be some, increased engagement on the part of our kids this year when we are required to grade them and give them formal grades.
thank you. We also have a question from another viewer, Marty. Will there be a remote-only option for families with high-risk people under that roof?
There most assuredly will be. One of the things the commissioner has said is he wants every district to ensure that there are remote learning opportunities for kids. And I've received several questions about that. What does that mean? And I want to be very honest with families who are thinking about choosing that. And everyone should feel like that's an opportunity for them if, a child has some kind of underlying health condition that might put that child at risk because they're attending school with so many other children, but also just because there are some families that would feel safer if children weren't attending school. We've had a lot of conversations about who would those teachers be, and I really want for parents and families to understand this. In the event that we have, say, a Hopkins 4th grade teacher who says, I have an underlying health condition, I won't be coming to work this year, and we had 20 kids in the 4th grade who said, we are also not coming because we're choosing remote instruction. In that scenario, that's the ideal scenario. We have one teacher and we have one full class size of kids who need remote instruction. That is a match made in heaven. We might also have a 3rd grade teacher who says she's not coming, and 24th grade teachers. And because of elementary certification, we could certainly ask that 3rd grade teacher to address those 4th grade needs. Again, kind of a match made in heaven. Not perfect, but the slight imperfection is certainly doable. Our worry is what's going to happen when we have, for example, two kids who are enrolled in, say, AP chemistry, a really high level specific singleton. And right now we have, say, three sections taught by one teacher in AP chemistry. And for that particular teacher to teach a remote section would cost the district 20% of that teacher's salary, right? At that point, we might have to say to a family, your kid can still have AP chemistry, but would need to take it as a VHS course or as an Edgenuity course. The state is intending to put out some kind of learning management system where that course might be available through that mechanism. But it's really going to depend on sort of teacher availability and the extent of our budget.
I also have questions from Lisa Brown, and she kind of has two that I'll read together and may answer. And I think you just answered part of the second one. But since a big piece of the success of this is students not coming to school when they do not feel well, the challenge with this can be the limitations on the number of days kids are allowed to be out sick. She also says this is also hard for high school students, especially those taking AP courses, who are fearful of missing content. Are there any policy changes to allow for more support and less restrictions on days out sick?
Yeah, we will, certainly be looking at our attendance and wellness policies around student attendance. Obviously, one of the things that happens at the elementary level, and our legal counsel would tell us that you absolutely need to send a letter after kids are out X number of days, so parents are aware that you are aware that kids aren't coming to school. But nothing terrible happens when a kid misses 7 days or 10 days at the elementary level, except that there might be some learning loss that we have to remediate when that student comes back. At the high school level, there's that whole issue of loss of credit. And I know families are very, very fearful of this. So, for example, if I reach day 19 in my English class and I have exceeded 10% of the year, there's the risk of loss of credit. We will certainly be looking at those policies because the last thing we want is children coming to school when they are unwell. So all of those policies around loss of credit, I don't want families to be nervous about those things. Certainly, we are going to, work around those things so that kids will get instruction while they are home if they have to quarantine because they have been around a COVID positive person, or if they're COVID quarantining because they themselves are COVID positive. We will certainly be, working with families to ensure that kids are getting instruction and B, not penalized for attendance reasons. I say all the time that the only way for this to work is for every family to do their part. So if a child has, an unusual cough or they've developed the sniffles, sore throat, any of those, typical COVID kind of symptoms for kids, please keep your children home. We will ensure that instruction takes place.
I also have another question follow up from Marty that says, you mentioned recorded lessons instead of live streaming. I don't remember that, but would there be any synchronous time as well? Would there be more than was offered in the spring? He also asked the second part. Also, could you please address special education support during a remote only model?
Sure. So, if students were to attend in a hybrid model, meaning they come to school on Monday, they get remote instruction on Tuesday, or they come to school in week A and in week B, they get remote instruction. In those scenarios, in the remote instruction, it is very likely that the instruction will be entirely asynchronous. And that doesn't mean that, that a teacher wouldn't hold, say, office hours because she felt like kids in her math class needed some help. Or it might not mean that, there are elementary teachers who invite all students, whether they are in person or remote, to something like morning meeting. But the goal really is to concentrate on the instruction of the kids who are the in-person kids on that day. but we will ensure that we are advancing the learning by pushing out some kind of asynchronous, recorded, maybe live streamed instruction on those days off. I shouldn't call it a day off. I should call it a day of remote learning. As for special education law sort of trumps everything. So if a student who is on an IEP chooses remote learning, we will make sure that the demands of the IEP are met. Absolutely.
And one last one that I have is Mary Ann. If the kids experience an exposure in the classroom, what will be allowed to report to the families?
Okay. So that's an interesting question. We have guidance right now from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, but we also have guidance from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health about when to close classrooms, when to ask students not to come to school, when to ask faculty not to come to school, when to close a single classroom, to close a school building. But the guidance that we're getting in those two settings doesn't seem to be in sync with each other. So what we're planning to do as a school district is to sort of write our own guidance that's in accordance with the Mass Department of Public Health and the CDC. And I don't know if I'm remembering the last part of your question, Bob. Will you ask me the last part again?
She asked, what will they be allowed? What will
Ah,
you be allowed to report to the families?
right. So we will probably be using the DPH contact tracing protocols that are in place. So if, and this really is not a question sort of for me to be answering, it's more of a question for the Department of Public Health to be answering. But if the DPH determines that a student has been in contact with someone who is COVID positive, certainly in terms of contact tracing, families will learn that they have been exposed to the virus. Things that will and will not be shared with families, I'm sure will come from DPH and will be in accordance with HIPAA violations or not violating HIPAA and all of that.
All right. Wow, this is great. By the way, in addition to Bob monitoring our YouTube questions, I also have Matt who's monitoring our Facebook comments and questions, and he's got something for you now.
Okay.
Yes. So Megan Sullivan Lucier on Facebook wants to know, will high school students be graded, parentheses, rather than pass fail, regardless of being at school or online?
Absolutely. Everyone will receive grades this year. Last spring, and I know many families were disappointed with this, the commissioner had in the beginning said, please just prevent regression. And then when he allowed us to introduce new material, he also said he would prefer that kids just got pass-fail grades. That guidance has changed, and this year kids will be assessed and graded as they normally would be.
All right, this has been really great. I'm really excited about this. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Oh yeah. I can't talk anymore anyways because we've got another question.
Okay.
Just one, it's Marty. What would a remote only model look like? Do you have a vision yet?
We are putting those kinds of schedules together at each of the building levels because a remote instruction model for grade 1 will look very different from a remote model and schedule for somebody who's, say, a junior in high school. A junior in high school may have a remote teacher from Hopkinton High School in math, maybe taking an online chemistry course, so that might be what it looks like at the high school level. We don't know because we have not yet determined how many teachers will need to be out for health conditions and how many students will be choosing remote instruction. We'll know that in a couple weeks. But at the elementary level, it would be developmentally inappropriate to expect that a first grader, for example, would be able to sit in front of a computer screen for, much longer than a 30 or 40-minute segment at a time. So we would probably have to push that instruction out. And, certainly it will be that combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning, but that would have to happen over the course of a day in small pieces.
And Laura Estevez asked a follow-up question. How are you planning with special areas like PE, music, art, or library that usually teach different groups?
So as the guidance from the commissioner suggests that kids stay in their classrooms. If, say, for example, we took that group of 24 students and we moved that student to the gym, to the art room, to the library, to the cafeteria, in the event that you had a COVID positive child in that group, that would really increase the opportunity for transmission. So the plan is for kids to, clearly they'll have mask breaks, and they'll have an opportunity to be able to stretch and maybe get outside under, hopefully, if we're able to secure some tents, that sort of thing. But when it comes to those areas that we call specials, or related arts, whatever it is that families like to call them, things like, fine arts and art class, that could push into the general education classroom, no problem. Library could push into the general education classroom, no problem. We are waiting for guidance from the commissioner for things like music education. Our guess is that he's not going to allow for chorus, but there could certainly be academic kinds of music lessons. And I don't even think that means stale things. Kids could have drumsticks and be learning things like rhythm, right? That would be fun for kids, but it would also eliminate that sort of need to sing, and they could keep their masks on. PE is one of the things that is kind of up in the air right now. Again, that's one of those places where we're waiting for guidance from the commissioner. If we had a hybrid model where only part of the classes were coming in at a time, you could certainly socially distance kids in the gym. It's just what kinds of activities are you able to do with young children who are, required to wear masks?
Okay, this has been really great. In fact, as I've been sitting back while all the questions have been rolling in, and we have another 4 weeks scheduled of you coming in, I might suggest that we consider. You said that the reopening committee is 36 people, which is a lot of people. Perhaps we want to kind of schedule a topic or two, maybe have one of them on with you for a little while, and we talk and you present some of the information that you've received and some of the information that you're working on. And then after we talk about that, we open up the questions and let people kind of focus on that.
That would be awesome. That would be
All right.
really great. Yes, and just so folks know where the 36 people come from, some of them are school employees, some of them are elected officials. The head of DPH in Hopkinton, Sean McAuliffe, is there, our head nurse, several teachers, all the building principals, many parents, and people were wondering how were those parents chosen. They just submitted information about themselves. So some are people who work in hospitals, some are virologists, some are parents who say, I'm an architect, some of them who say, I have a child with some underlying health condition, and the story is very compelling. So that's how people were chosen, just so that they would bring a different frame of reference, each of them, into the group.
Fantastic. I do want all the viewers out there to know that if you submitted a question and we did not get it, we will forward those to the superintendent, and she can respond to those offline. So, Carol, thank you so much for your time. It's been really great. And we should talk offline about what the next several weeks will be and how we want to schedule them and format them.
That's fantastic, Jim. Thank you, because this is such a nice opportunity to share information with the community, and I'm sure people are very eager for it.
And actually in our last minute, I'm wondering, where do you look outside of HPS? Do you look primarily at the state, at the federal, or at some other national organization of doctors in education, or like where do you go for expertise?
Well, we do consult with DESE. They give us a lot of guidelines, and we have to remember that they are guidelines. And I think that the other group that I look to are my fellow superintendents, who are sort of all over Metro West. They share a lot of really good ideas. But I'll tell you, the reentry group has been wonderful.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pushback there and a lot of dialogue, so that's been super helpful.
That's great.
Mhm.
Where are you meeting? Are you guys meeting remotely, or do you have a big room for 36 people somewhere?
No, while I would have liked to have done that, I was reminded by the Department of Public Health that we had not actually transitioned at the time of our start into Charlie Baker's phase 3. So we are remote meters.
All right. Thanks so much for the work that you do for our community. It's a critical aspect, as you know.
Jim, thank you so much for having me. I look forward to next week.
So do I. I'll see you then.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
All right. And now, next up will be Tom Nappy, which means it'll be sports. So, Tom, take it away.
Thanks for the introduction. All right. So, a lot going on in the sports world, and joining us momentarily, we're going to have Andy Barron from MyFM 101.3 to talk all about it. And we'll talk some summer baseball that's going on, some local summer baseball. Of course, as many of you know, we've been covering Ashland Sevens summer baseball. Typically, it would be the Ashland Legion program, but this season they are the Ashland Sevens, as they are playing in an independent league. And we will also be talking about some the professional sports world as well. Joining me as my co-host is Bob Hamilton. Bob, how are you today?
Hi, Tom. I'm fine, thank you. I'm glad that we have an opportunity to have Andy on today. It's going to work out, I hope, as long as he can get in.
Absolutely. And I guess he was. Oh, there he is.
All right, that was me. Sorry, Andy, you're in now.
All right. Andy, how are you?
Hey, Tom, how we doing? Can you hear me okay?
Can you hear us, Andy?
We could hear you perfect. If you could just
Yep.
maybe tilt down a little bit. Perfect. All right.
All right.
So first off, Andy, you've been pretty busy as of late covering some Milford. Well, I guess we can't call it Legion baseball, but
No, unofficial.
We'll call it Milford unofficially. Milford Independent Baseball. How about that? It would typically be the Milford Legion team. They are in the Worcester County League, and it's many of the Zone 4 teams. And right now they have a 3-4 record. How has your experience been covering Milford Legion ball?
Tom, it's been great. This was thrown together really at the last minute. I don't think anybody expected that we'd be playing anything this summer. As we speak, and as you know, you're covering Ashland, not Legion, Ashland baseball, I guess is what we'll call it. But I really got to give the 10 teams a lot of credit. The Zone 4 teams all came together, and they said, "Let's make this happen. We got to do it for the kids." And I think that's the thing that they've been hitting home at. Coach Steve DeVito of Milford has been definitely the focal front runner of getting the teams involved, and also the coaches in Shrewsbury, Leominster, Framingham, Cherry Valley, Sturbridge, and all the 3 teams in Worcester as well. And I got to tell you, Tom, I really think the quality of play has been very, very good. I mean, you just don't know. These kids didn't play baseball or any type of sports for 3 months. Some of them had their senior years done. Some are in college. Some are finished or going into their second year of college. And they said, "This is great. We're just glad to be back on the field and playing a sport that we really enjoy." The players, we've all been taking social distancing practices and measures. Fans have been great as well. And it's just great to get people outdoors and get people doing some sort of the new normal, is to say. But I've been very, very impressed in how the league really has been. It's been very competitive.
Yeah, it certainly has. And Ashland, they're playing in the Massachusetts Independent Baseball League. It's been a very competitive league as well. They hopped on with many of the Zone 6 teams. But I just have to say, it is so great to have baseball back, to have sports back, and to see the kids out there having an opportunity to play, especially since many of them who would play in the spring for their respected schools, they didn't get that opportunity, but they're out there playing some summer baseball. And I feel like there has been more of an interest by players in summer baseball because of what happened with the spring season.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. I mean, you really hit the nail on the head there. A lot of these kids, they're really just happy to be out there, and of course they want to win. The coaches want to win, but I think Coach DeVito said it really best on the Sports Buzz a few weeks back on MyFM. He said, "You know, we're here for them. We just want them to be out there and to be out there playing and enjoying themselves, enjoying their teammates, giving them something to do. And I think a lot of the other coaches also feel the same way as well. And this is going to be a very short season. Milford has about 5 or 6 more games, I believe, and then they will be doing a zone tournament coming next weekend. It'll only be a single elimination, as usually in the Legion format, it's a double elimination. And there's no state tournament, no regional, no World Series. That's all been canceled, as everyone knows. But still, the Zone 4, yeah, there is still a lot to play for here. And I can tell you something. I, for one, will never forget this, because this is just so unusual. And it's just to be at the park. And I also want to commend Johnny Wilbur as well, as he's been calling the games. Tim Cowett, unable to call the games this year for Milford. But it's been a great experience for us. And, we've had a lot of the fans and the parents have been so pleased that MyFM is able to carry these games, because, as you know, Milford Legion is a staple in this community. I mean, they've been around for well over 50, 60 years. This is part of their summer here, and just to not have that baseball was just really, it's just shocking. So it's just great that there at least is some relevant of normal here.
Absolutely. It is great to see the kids back out there on the diamond. It's something that we were really questioning after they canceled the spring season. And then, of course, especially after they canceled the Legion season, will there be any type of baseball this summer? But I feel like the teams around here, they've created some great leagues around here. So a lot of the local teams are playing and they are busy. And of course, you have programs like the Senior Ruth program that some teams, such as Hopkinton, who are hoping to cover at some point. We're still waiting for word on that. But they were able to reform their Senior Ruth Legion team and pretty much pulled together a lot of the kids that would have played on the high school team. And Coach Simos is coaching that team as well. So pretty much the Hopkinton kids getting an opportunity to play with the team that they would have played with in the spring this summer. And again, we're hoping to get some games in. We're hoping to be able to cover that. We are waiting for the official word, but we will certainly keep you updated. But in any case, a lot of the professional sports are coming back now. And Thursday, it is MLB opening day. The Red Sox first game is going to be Friday, only a couple games on the first day of the season. But the Sox will have their first game on Friday against the Baltimore Orioles. I'm excited, Andy. And Bob, I think it's great that Major League Baseball is coming back. They had a lot of issues to get to this point, but they were able to work out the 60-game season, and pretty much teams will be playing teams within their division or teams in the opposite league in that same division. So you'll see AL East versus AL East teams and AL East versus NL East teams. But I think despite all the issues that they had, they did a nice job being able to come up with at least a 60-game season.
Hi, Tom, I'd like to butt in here and say, I'm waiting to see what happens with the television. Obviously, it's going to be limited attendance. So how are they going to cover all this? I want to know if it's going to be more about baseball than anything else. I want to see the players out there playing. I hope that they're going to provide as much coverage as they used to, even though they don't have the revenue coming in to support that. What do you think?
Well, I think TV is going to be huge, huger than ever. Since I think at most of the ballparks, I don't know if it's all of them. I'm not 100% sure on that. It could be a city by city thing, a state by state thing, but there's going to be many games that are non-attended by fans. So the only way to see that team is through TV. And I think that you're going to see even more TV coverage than you would normally see. It wouldn't surprise me if you see more national games than you normally see. I think the local stations will keep doing what they do. So you'll see all the Red Sox games if you're here in the Massachusetts area, all the Yankees games if you're out there in New York. But I believe that there'll probably be a whole lot of national coverage too. From what I understand, they are trying to accommodate the national channels with pretty much the same amount of games that they would have in a normal season. So I think you're going to see a whole lot of nationally televised games. Any thoughts on that, Andy?
Tom and Bob, you brought up a really good question too. How about we go back to the old ways and put games on Friday nights like on Fox? How about we maybe the MLB network offer some free games? I mean, this is such an extraordinary, guys, this is the shortest season since 1878, which is just mind boggling. I mean, we've never done something like this before. You've got to give people, I believe, a reason to want to tune in because right now, I think a lot of people are really irritated with some of the professional sports. With look, the bickering these guys did, I thought was disgraceful, honestly, and that really spells trouble for this sport coming up in 2 years when they're, I believe, next year after their bargaining agreement expires, and this is going to be a big problem for baseball going forward. So,
Oh, it looks like Andy cut out. So
Well, I wanted to say I hopefully he can get back in, but I was agreeing with Andy mostly, and basically I know what you said, Tom, that there's going to be a lot of coverage of baseball. There'll be a lot of TV of it, but my point was, are they going to try and saturate us with the commercials in order to gain back some of the revenue that may be lost? Because the teams aren't going to get the local revenue that they're going to have. So hopefully that it'll be about baseball and not just airtime, because they know we're a captive audience. If you put the ball team on the field and you tune in and 2 seconds later you're gone to a commercial and then you come back and say, oh yeah, you missed that home run. That's not going to make for a very good, at least not make me a very good fan of baseball.
And that's a good point. And one of the criticisms of baseball has been the oversaturation of commercials. I mean, I believe that you'll probably have the standard commercials, such as the commercials between innings. But I think if they add additional commercials, I don't think it'll go very well. One thing that our local network does, Nesson, who covers the Red Sox, that I think is very cool, is even during some of the commercials, they'll show what's going on the field, and they'll also have stats and lineups pop up during the commercial. So I think that's pretty cool because it kind of keeps you invested in the game. And when they're doing that, I'm not even usually typically looking at the commercial. I'm looking at the lineup and I'm looking at the what's going on the field. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe some of the sponsors might be like, hey, this guy just said that he's not even watching our commercials because you're putting all these up. You got to stop doing that during our commercial. I hope that's not the case. But I think finding ways to keep the fans invested in the game is what baseball needs to do because the ratings have dropped the last few years. I have a hard time believing if they drop this year, that would be very bad for baseball in general because this should be a year where you have people tuning in every night, more people than usual, more sports fans than usual because sports fans are hungry, especially for professional sports. We have some of those independent summer leagues back, and we have some of the school kids out there playing. But I think it's going to be ultra important for baseball to really try to get as much viewership as possible, especially since people can't go to the games. And this is the year where they could really make themselves stand out and show that, hey, we're willing to listen to the fans. We're willing to make these games faster. We want you to enjoy them more. They have a real big opportunity here to do just that. And if they don't capitalize on that, there's going to be a lot of trouble, I think, down the road for baseball.
Well, and what you brought up about the ads running while they still show the games, I've noticed that, and I'm not a big fan of golf, but I have been watching golf on the weekends, and they've been doing that during their tournaments, that they'll continue to show the players on the course as well as run their commercials on the split screen on the side. Of course, it's easy enough to follow the play that way. And that would be an ideal way for sports going forward to process their commercials, especially when there's a lot of stuff going on the field. And sometimes, in my case, I believe that the baseball games go way too long. They take too much time between innings doing commercials. And if they could, since this is a shortened season, let's shorten the game.
Boy, do they ever take too long sometimes. And it looks like Andy is.
Hi, sorry about that, Tom.
No problem.
I'm sorry. Apologize. Something, I don't know if I did something or I just, sorry.
Technology, you got to love it.
Yes, I know. So, okay. So like I was saying, yeah, I think baseball, yeah, I think it's good that the games are back, but I just was I personally just was getting really tired of all the bickering back and forth. And this guy said this thing. You know what, guys? Enough. All right. This is a game that I believe is starting to lose interest, and they have got to figure out a way to get interest back. So right now, here you go. You got a 60-game season, and honestly, gentlemen, everyone has a chance here. Okay, 60 games is like nothing. I mean, that's going to be over in a blink of an eye. So some teams that maybe weren't going to have a season at all going into here could be like a team like the Padres, for example. I don't think they will, but you just really just don't know how something like this is going to go. But baseball has got to think outside the box. I really truly believe that.
Well, I don't have the exact statistics on this, and we were kind of talking about similar points to what you just made there. Well, you were trying to reconnect with us, but I think if there's any season that baseball could capitalize on, that they could gain more fans, that they could gain more interest, it's this one, because sports fans are hungry for sports, especially professional sports, which we really haven't seen besides the MLS in recent days. And this is a big opportunity to really get those baseball fans back, speed up those games, make changes that make the game more appealing, cut down on the commercials. One thing that Nesson does, they're showing the field during a lot of the commercials they play. They're showing the lineup on the side of the screen. I'm watching that stuff more than the commercial, and I love it because I like just watching the pitcher warm up, between the innings. I think it's a cool feature that they have. Maybe more networks can start doing stuff like that. But if there's any season that baseball could get their ratings up, get their fans back, because they've been on a downward spiral the last few years, it's this season with the 60 games. And to your point, that we don't know what's going to happen since it's a 60-game season, I think that's spot on, because you look at past seasons, and typically a season is 162 games. So you're playing a little less than a third of the season. And how many times throughout the first 60 games did one of those teams start off at the top of the standings, maybe through the entire first 60 games, and then all of a sudden fall off after the All-Star break and not do anything? It happened a lot. I'd love to get the exact statistics on that. I'd have to look into it, but I remember seeing first place teams end up in fourth place by the end of the season. This year, it's going to be a sprint to the finish. If you go through one of those 10-game patches where you're not winning ball games and you go on a 10-game losing streak, that right there could cost you the season. And it could be the same in the opposite way. You go on a 10, 15-game winning streak, that right there might mean that you're finishing off with enough wins to get in that playoff race, even if you don't play too well for the rest of the season. So it's going to be really interesting. And Major League Baseball, I mean, I guess all of this is blessing in disguise, because they have a real opportunity here, I think more than ever in the last few years, to really reinvent the game and get that audience back.
Tom, just real quick too, Rob Manfred and Tony Clark, they need to start being held accountable for their actions here, because honestly, it falls on them. If this season does not go well and then next year does not go well, then they're going to have to start making some changes, because they simply cannot continue to keep going in this direction. And you're absolutely 100% right. Baseball has a chance to reinvent themselves, and this is the perfect opportunity for them to do that. I will say I am very, very interested in this 60 games to see how it's going to go. But the biggest question that I am going to pose, can they get through the entire season? That's really, nobody really knows.
And that's
Yep.
partly because of the Corona-19 virus. They've already had several players that have tested positive, and they've had to isolate those players. So how's that going to affect the team when it's in a hot streak, 60 games out? That's crazy.
Right, Bob? You're going to have to quarantine the whole team? I mean, if one or two players get sick, how can you play that game? Even no fans or fans at all. I mean, that's a problem, and that's something. I mean, do you feel comfortable? Like, if I'm a Red Sox player and I have to go play in Florida, which they have to go play the Marlins, I'm not feeling very comfortable going there right now, considering. And same thing in like California. I mean, and I mean, it's just, you've got to think about these things. Maybe this is why a lot of the big time players said, I'm not going to play this year.
Right.
Right. Because
Go
you
ahead,
don't
Bob.
know what that area that you're going to is going to be like. If you're gone there for a 4-game series, you got to stay in a hotel, you've got to eat out, you've got to interact with the press. That's going to be a real chance for infection. So yeah, it's going to be tough for players to try and stay with it.
Well, I mean, if they handle it anything like the NHL is proposing, they wouldn't allow players to leave the hotel rooms. Yeah, because the NHL, they're simply not going to allow players to leave the hotel rooms. It's pretty much you go from the arena to your hotel room and you stay in your hotel room. You're not allowed to leave. Will players follow that? I don't know. But I think that's a big question in every league and every sport that's going on right now. Will they finish the season? Because as you mentioned, Andy, you get a couple players on that team that test positive, and then you realize they played the game and may have infected the other team or players on their team or umpires or anything like that. That could be a real issue, and that could mean a whole team is going into quarantine for a couple of weeks, and they have to take 2 weeks off. And it's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, we're obviously hoping that they could play those full 60 games. I know the MLB is doing testing every single day of all the players before each game. They have to get tested and they have to get their temperatures checked and all that stuff. So I think they are taking a lot of precautions. But what if a player decides to go out in Florida and goes to a restaurant or something like that and encounters somebody that has the virus? Maybe they weren't even supposed to go, but they do anyway. So I think that's could be an issue. It's really all going to be wait and see, as it's really been throughout this entire pandemic. Wait and see, because we just don't know what's going to happen.
We really don't know, and that's really the scary part. I mean, a lot of people thought this virus would be under control by the summer, and it's gone in the complete opposite direction. Now, a lot of people are saying it's going to get even worse in the fall. I mean, we just simply just don't know. I mean, the virus is really. My mother's been a nurse for 43 years, and she said the virus will do whatever it takes to survive, and that's. Boy, what a 4 months this has been. I mean, Tom, I came on your show 4 months ago, and I feel like we're still talking about the same thing. I mean, it's like, have we made any progress? I mean, yes, now we're getting leagues that are starting back up, but the biggest question I have now is the NFL, because football and baseball are two totally different games. I mean, baseball, you can stagger people out for sure, but football, I've been talking with football coaches, players, and they're like, you cannot keep people off of each other. It's impossible.
No, you can't. And I know that football's already considering no fans. I know the Giants and Jets have already announced no
Eagles
fans.
too.
Patriots have announced 20% capacity. Yeah, Eagles too. So I don't think there'll be fans in football if it even happens. Maybe there'll be certain stadiums, if they're allowed to, that have very limited capacity. Maybe the 20% capacity at Gillette will be okay. It'll certainly be different not having the fans there. That's part of the fun. That's part of the fun of watching the games. I know they were very late in planning their safety precautions, and the players were waiting a long time for a statement from Goodell about how this is going to be handled. They finally have some answers, but being a season that's not even supposed to start to September initially, they should have had those answers probably a lot sooner than they did. But I guess now at least we're getting some, and I think football, as everything else, is a wait and see. But I do want to get to a little bit of kind of breaking news here. The MIAA is meeting about the fall season. So we have some information about the fall season. And Rich Garvin of the Worcester Telegram tweeted that the board of directors unanimously approved a second recommendation that the season would start September 14th. It was due to start August 21st for football and August 24th for all other sports, but it's looking like we're going to have a delayed start to the fall season. And obviously, there's the real possibility that it doesn't happen. But as far as we know right now, there'll most likely definitely be a delayed start. So we're certainly hoping that the fall season will happen. I know there's been some talks of moving contact sports like football to the spring. And I understand some other states have done just that. So that is a consideration as well. What do you guys think about the possibility of fall sports happening? Do you think it'll happen, and how do you think it'll look?
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, I think it won't happen. That's just my opinion. We had on earlier Carol Cavanagh, superintendent for Hopkinton Schools, talking about the fact that they didn't get the directions that they expected from the state as to what would be required by the schools to open. So they have to come up with their own plans, and those plans have to change and be coordinated and organized with the state. I can't imagine that sports would be any different. Sports would have to be one of the last things that all of the state legislators are thinking about regulating. And I do see that there are kids out on the fields practicing, trying to get in some preschool practice like they used to. But I can't see that the leagues are going to allow all the games to go on throughout the year. I hope they do, and I hope it's only a late start. But how much shorter can the season be?
Right.
Bob, you make a great point, because this is exactly what happened in the spring. You know, they decided, well, we're going to cancel it for 2 weeks. Then 2 weeks became 4 weeks, and it became a month, and then it was over.
Right.
And that's the only. I don't know if delaying it actually helps it, because, okay, now you come in. What if there is another spike coming our way, and we got to push it back out to October 1st? Then it becomes the end of October, and then it's just going to be too late. Here's a proposal, and I told you this earlier, Tom. Play baseball in the fall and move football to the spring. I mean,
Yep.
I know it sounds a little crazy, but California did the same thing. Listen, baseball, you can play outdoors, you can play in the afternoons. Yeah, the weather gets cold, but still you can play night games under the lights. But I think that could be something. Maybe this start picking up steam. I doubt it will happen. But look, we got to get creative here. This virus is going to be here in September. It's not going away. I mean, we have to accept it, and it stinks, and I agree. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be really, really difficult. You're always seeing colleges pretty much are done for the fall. I mean, and I'm talking major colleges, guys. You got like Williams College, Bowdoin College. I mean, California, no football. I mean, this is serious stuff. I mean, the MIAA's, they're going to have to get creative. I mean, and I really hope they do come back, because I really feel bad for a lot of these athletes who have just had their seasons completely taken away from them. I know I was a former athlete myself. I'd be devastated if I couldn't play. But, you know, I guess none of us have the answers on this, but I would be honestly very, very surprised if this starts on the 14th.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're all kind of guessing right now, just like everybody else is. The MIAA, obviously, they run high school sports in the state, but the schools have a say. So if a school comes in and they say, hey, we don't feel comfortable with fall sports, well, maybe that school doesn't play. And then maybe there's other schools that do play. So no one knows what's going to happen with that. But I think what's going to be most important here is our kids back in school. If it's all e-learning, there'll be no sports.
No sports.
If kids are back in school, even if it's to an extent, there could possibly be some sports. I mean, we're watching these summer baseball leagues go right now, and knock on wood, so far so good. Everything's running smoothly, but that could change in an instant. I know there was one team in an independent league that had to be quarantined for 2 weeks, and fortunately, I guess they didn't have any contact with any other teams at that point. But and I'm not sure what happened with that situation, but that's the type of stuff you'll get. If there's a threat in someone's family, or somebody had contact with someone that has COVID-19, then you could have a whole team being quarantined. But I like to think that if kids are back in school, they'll figure out something. And I can't imagine, I could definitely imagine football being moved to the spring. I could definitely imagine sports with no fans. I think soccer is another sport you have to look at. There's a lot of close contact in that as well. But we got about a minute left. So, Andy, I just want to ask you real quickly, do you like Cam Newton on the Patriots or not? And Bob will ask you the same thing, and make it short and sweet, because we got to wrap up.
Well, at first, no, I didn't. But I will say, I was impressed that he reached out to the young receivers and he's working out with them. That is a good sign, because it's the exact opposite what Tom Brady did last year. And I'm not saying that this is going to work, but you know what?
We'll see.
kind of am starting to like it a little bit.
All right, Bob, yes or no? You like it, Cam Newton?
No,
All right, there we go. I like the Cam Newton edition. I think he's a better starter than Stidham. That is going to wrap up our show. Andy, thanks so much for joining us, and a big thank you to Dr. Carol Cavanagh as well. This has been the Hopkinton Hangout Hour. We'll talk to you live on Facebook, YouTube, and HCAM TV tomorrow at 2 p.m. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.